Hi, I'm Ian Freeman from Keene, 63 Emerald Street, and I'm currently running for City Council at large. I'm disappointed to hear that there may have been a vote, but the letter was never sent. I hope that we can iron that detail out. And Carl, I appreciate the comments about the police officers that have maybe been a surprise to you that are for the end of Prohibition. I know a number of them are associated with a great organization called LEAP. It stands for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. This is a group of thousands of mostly former officers, people who have had experience enforcing the war on drugs. And I'd like to be clear, LEAP is against all prohibition, so not just cannabis, but all prohibition entirely. These are people who have had the experience, they've been in the streets, they've done undercover work, and they found out that this is completely pointless. That for all of the billions of dollars and all the hours of time and all the people that have been put behind bars, drugs are worse than they've ever been. And in fact, if you look at synthetic marijuana or bath salts, the reasons why these things exist, and there's plenty of evidence to say they're dangerous, the reason why these things exist is because of prohibition in the first place. In the same way that during alcohol prohibition, the people who were moving product around illegally wanted to make sure they maximize. You get a back of a truck, you can only fit so much alcohol in there, so you're more likely to use that back of the truck to transport hard liquor than you were for beer. So that's one of the reasons why prohibition drives harder and harder drugs into people's hands. Whereas if young people or anybody who wanted to catch a buzz could get marijuana legally from, the corner market or whatever in their neighborhood, that would likely prevent a lot of these things from ever becoming a problem in the first place. So, to me, it's not just a legislative issue; it's also a moral issue. And I think that I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but I guess that at least 2 out of the 5 of you folks up at the front of the room, I'm not saying which 2, but at least 2, just based on statistics, have probably tried marijuana at some time in your life. And odds are good that had you been caught for the possession of marijuana and ended up with an arrest record, or maybe you were even selling a little bit to some of your friends at the time, that your life wouldn't be better had you spent any time in jail. In fact, you might be worse off because you might lose your job, you might lose your house, and these stories are not uncommon. There are a lot of people, and of course it's mostly poor people, who end up getting busted for things like drug possession. The drug wars clearly failed. There's plenty of drugs on the street. They're more available than ever and more dangerous. Cannabis is being legalized. I'm sure you've heard the news. Washington and Colorado recently had legalization measures. Decriminalization is good. You could decriminalize it to the point where it wasn't a crime at all. Legalization is good too. And like you said, you can't do anything about that. But what you could do is pass some sort of resolution to encourage the folks in Concord to do the right thing here. And from your perspective, it's the right thing to speak out about this issue because your community members are being put in handcuffs. They are being forced to come into this courtroom, and then forced to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars into a system that then just uses that money to enforce it further on their friends. So to me, it's all about morality and being good neighbors, and you guys, we're all neighbors here, putting our friendly, peaceful neighbors who might be enjoying a little bit of cannabis after work rather than a drink of alcohol, putting those folks in handcuffs and taking their freedom away is certainly the wrong thing to do. And Keene, as New Hampshire's most progressive city, should lead the way and pass that resolution asking the legislature to decriminalize cannabis or legalize it, both is fine, and also issue an order to the police to no longer enforce those existing statutes. Because the one thing that Ken wouldn't point out up here, I think, is that they have full discretion. And there are statutes on the books that are not actively enforced by the police department. In fact, I don't have the number, but it does exist. And if you want, I can dig it up for you and email it. But there's a statute that says you cannot play sports on Sunday in New Hampshire. You don't see the police out staking out the Little League games and, arresting coach. So that stuff doesn't happen because those laws are ridiculous. And it's similarly ridiculous that our neighbors are being put in cages over possession of flowers. So I encourage you to do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Further comments from the public?
Yeah.
Please name and address.
Yep. My name is Garrett Ian. I'm domiciled at 75 Levitt. So my fellow civilians, thank you for this opportunity to address you today. especially on this important issue that affects us at so many levels. As states assert themselves in the face of monolithic federal empire, New Hampshire sees itself riding poorly behind on the bottom of the coattails of pioneer states such as Colorado and Washington. While it's worth recognizing the recently passed medical marijuana legislation at the state level, we are still behind all of our neighbors on the issue of decriminalization. Every year, activists converge several times on Concord to help forward bills that seldom will see the light of the New Hampshire Senate. And the refrain is often heard about federal impediments, and it's as though these positions of these federal masters should be any concern of ours in this community. These federal masters that are 500 miles away. So it was recently realized or discovered that Patrick Leahy, Vermont senator, he's going to be hosting a series of hearings before the Senate Judiciary Committee and the U.S. Senate, and it's going to weigh cannabis's possible rescheduling or maybe federal decriminalization. The ball is rolling on this issue, and the reason it's rolling is because of activists who dedicated themselves to this cause throughout the nation, who chose not to focus on the lost cause of D.C., but instead are spreading awareness and resistance at the state and local level. The world is changing because of those who agitated for change, despite those telling them that they were wasting their time and that the hands of local authorities were tied by the masters above them. Individuals each possess a conscience, and there comes a point when each of us can reject the rules of the institutions that ensnare us in the favor of natural laws that have long since been neglected. The City Council has recently been urged to stand up to the problems caused by synthetic smoking products, often marketed as imitation cannabis. Without statutory authorization, DPRK leaders took steps to resist a substance that is otherwise legal under state law. But as is recognized by opponents of the product spice, relating the substance to cannabis at all is misleading. The side effects are akin to dangerous pharmaceuticals, yet we remain in a society where safer alternatives prompt armed raids with bearcats, and legal poisons become progressively more dangerous as they are tweaked to satisfy the most recent updates in the prohibitions. On the issue of spice, despite the lack of legal precedent, the City Council chose to agitate for action. They attempted to be ahead of the curve. I'm asking you, fellow civilians, to be ahead of the curve on cannabis decriminalization. This goes beyond taking advantage of a unique political opportunity, understanding fundamentally that it is wrong to lust for cages to be put around those who enjoy a safe, natural, and effective product should be enough to understand why this issue is not one worth ignoring. For those of you with doubts about the necessity of this inevitable policy change, I'd invite you to check out the content produced by Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. I think they give a very unique perspective as to why the drug war is a failure, and we should start today to reverse its problems. So thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any